There we go. Hey everybody, it's Stephanie over at Flyleaf Counseling with Kim at Flyleaf Counseling and Allie down at Flyleaf Counseling. And it's Flyleaf Talks About Stuff, where we get to talk about the things that we want to talk about. Hey girls.
Well, hi, how's everybody?
Good.
I was just enjoying an impromptu introduction dance party.
The Brady Bunch.
Well, apparently the way that I had set it up before was just all kinds of, confusing and was not reflective about how my peers were seeing it. So I had to conform.
And that works.
And it worked. And so here we are, all aligned. Today, what are we talking about?
We are talking about how we explain, I don't know, therapy, or I don't know what the word is, how we explain things in life, I guess, using metaphors, and what metaphors that we generally use.
Yeah, because I think that we do some good ones. And I think that we do metaphor. I think that we do analogy. I think that we do simile. I think that we do that all really, really well. And it does promote healing. I think that it just takes it to a deeper level.
I think it promotes understanding too. It keeps it from being so high level that it's hard to understand.
Yeah.
At least I know for me, my brain has to bring things down to a digestible level for me to really grasp what's going on. And what I'm trying to say. So those things work really well for me.
Yeah. And we talk about stories all the time. Like we own our stories, we write our stories. And so metaphor and analogies, I mean, those just fit right in.
Volumes, chapters, verses, those things.
Our philosophy is a freaking metaphor.
That's true.
Light bulb.
Light bulb.
That's what you were saying the whole time, but I'm like, what?
That's what Flyleaf is. We're not really a page.
I'm a people, not a paper.
Yeah. It's so cool though. I'll tell you, when I was living in Hawaii, I had a therapist at the time, and she said something to me, and I told her, I said, I feel like I was ready to move in the next chapter of my life. And I said, I feel like I'm in this horse race and my gate's not opening. Like I know where I want to go. I want to be in this life race and I'm just ready to go. And she said, there's a funny thing about horse races. And I said, what? And she goes, what are the horses wearing? And I said, I don't know. And she goes, blinders. And it was like, as soon as she said that, a big epiphany went off for me, and it changed the direction of my life. Like I was thinking that it was supposed to go from point A to point B and be really continuous and pretty like that. And it didn't, but I still got the same result. I just had to go from A to F to G to X, but I still got there.
And how you could use your analogy and like have a teachable moment in there that resonated so deeply.
Right. But I hear us doing it all the time with our
what's
clients.
One that you use often?
Well, there's two. One of them is my the crabs in the bucket, where if you are somebody who's either trying to pull yourself up out of a toxic environment, whether it's through addiction or through abusive relationships or just a toxic relationship with yourself, but the crabs in the bucket, where you'll always watch in a bucket full of crabs, they're all crawling on each other, and there's always that one that's like, what? WTF, I don't really want to be here anymore. And so they start to pull themselves out, but then there are always those crabs that pull them back in. And addiction can be like that, and toxic environments can be like that, because if that means that you're getting healthy up there, then what am I? And I don't want to look at what's going on with me. I'd rather just pull you back down into it. So I use that analogy a lot. And then the hard-boiled eggs in life, where sometimes there's those days where you have it glides off easily, right? If you eat hard-boiled eggs, you know that if you crack it, the shell comes off and it's just a great day. And then there are those days where they start difficult, but then you hit it right, and then the day ends up being great and the shell comes off nicely. And then there's those days where you continue to hit it and like little pieces fly off, and then parts of the egg fly off, and it no longer looks like an egg, and the day no longer looks like the day. But I don't know. Those are some of the ones that I've always used that I love. What about you guys?
I talk a lot about my turtle analogy, just that, I don't know if I want to get all into it, but just that if we look at how turtles live their life and how they live to be so old, it's just by being slow and meticulous, and by retreating when we need to retreat, and resting and coming back out. It isn't about feeling like you have to tackle the world every day all the time. It's just knowing when to rest and recharge, and knowing when to come back out and face your day, and then taking on things one at a time, and not trying to take on everything one at a time and completely losing your shell, so to speak. And it's okay to be protective of yourself. That's what gives us the longevity. We need to kind of make it through this journey that we're on in life.
You also use the Zacks.
I do. I use the Zacks. That's a great story. And it's just those two Dr. Seuss people that just kind of bump in the middle, and one goes north, one goes south, never to the east and never to the west. And what happens is they just stand there stubborn, and they refuse to see another side of anything. They refuse to give a little bit. They just get so stuck in themselves that the world continues to move, though, and their world continues to grow. And in the book, you have this beautiful picture of these two Zacks in a prairie. And then later on in the book, the two Zacks are still standing in the same spot, only there's a complete highway built around them. And there's a whole city built around them, because just because we get stuck in who we are and we get stuck in whatever space that we're in doesn't mean the world's going to stop. We have to continue to move with the world. And reframe and reshape how we view it. So,
right.
Allie?
What? Metaphor?
Yeah.
Metaphor, analogies.
So I told you guys the African proverb I really like, which I think is metaphorical, and it goes, a child will burn down a village just to feel its warmth. So I think that can apply to a lot of different people who act angrily when they're seeking something else.
Right.
So there's that one. And then I refer to family systems and changes in a family systems, like a family system, like cogs in a machine. And if we were to take out one cog and replace it with something else, because maybe that cog, that person has done their own healing or changing, the rest of the cogs might not fit so well with it, and the machine might vibrate or spark for a minute, but hopefully it'll settle into a new rhythm, and maybe other cogs will start to change too, and the whole system will just crank together differently.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
I do like that.
I know that we've always talked about too, like putting on, like if it comes to depression, putting on, the glasses of depression and, seeing things differently versus when you take them off. I mean, I think that we speak a lot in analogy and metaphor.
I read one in a book, and honestly, the night I told you guys about this book earlier, and I can't remember the name of it again. Do you remember the name of it?
Wait, it started with a U.
It's something. Oh, anyway, it's about
raising. About it this morning.
Yeah, I just showed you the book this morning.
I can't even bring it to my short-term memory right now.
It's like unhinged, but that's not it.
That's not it. But it's about raising adolescent girls into young adulthood. And one of the analogies that the author uses, which I think is a beautiful one, and then I always take analogies and run with them because I think that's my superpower, is just to never stop running with something. But what she talks about is that, like, raising kids is like teaching them to tread water. So in the beginning, you're in the middle of the pool with them and you're holding their hands and you're teaching them to tread water. And as they learn to tread water, you move back further and further and let them feel their own confidence, knowing that you're close by. And then eventually what you have in adulthood is somebody who treads water and knows that they can always go to the edge of the pool for safety and security. But the edge of the pool doesn't move in. So the edge of the pool is there and stable. And as an adult, it's up to, or as a big person, whatever it is, it's up to the person treading water to know when they need the safety. And it's up to them to learn when to swim to the side. It's up to them to learn to come and ask for help instead of always being in the middle of it with them. And you're teaching them to trust their own stuff and to maybe even stay longer than they thought they could. But the rub is that when they come to the side of the pool is that they get safety and they get help and they get security. And then they learn to be safe and trying new things in the middle of the pool if they know they can always come to the side and be safe. And I think that's a great analogy for kind of what it's like to raise a strong, resilient person.
I totally agree.
Agreed.
I like that one.
I know that I would use the kind of along the same lines, but I would use the boxing ring as a metaphor for how you want to, parent, where it's contained, but yet the kids have enough room to push up against without breaking through. So, I mean, it's that flow of warmth and I don't want to say high rules, but just presence, right? But still allowing them to have their own autonomy and encouraging it.
Right. And I have the other one that I use a lot is when I talk about, I think we were talking about this earlier, the conversation between your neocortex and your subcortex and your prefrontal cortex, and how, like, I've always got my brain.
Get your brain.
My brain. So this part of your brain and this part of your brain, and this is that part that's attached to your body, and this is your learning thinking part. And so I always imagine that this part is like Ricky and Lucy, Ricardo, right? So this part back here is screaming in a language that this part doesn't understand, in this case, Spanish. So Ricky Ricardo is screaming at Lucy, and he's all activated and acting all like animated and activated. And she's over here going like, well, how do you do it? Well, I don't know what you're doing. Like, I don't know. And just kind of flocking up and not saying anything and going like, I don't know what to do with that. And I think that's what our brain does. And then as soon as this starts to calm down, even though the language barrier might still be there, this part can start to understand it because it's talking a little more slowly and it's giving more information. When it does that, it's not so panicked. And so I always use that analogy when I talk about what it's like to have a panic or to get into that fight or flight and those kinds of things. And so for those of you who know who Ricky and Lucy are, that's great. But for our really young people on Fuller House, I only know this because my kids watch it, or my daughter watches it. But on Fuller House, if you look at Kimmy and her husband, I think his name is, Fernando, I think is his name. But they do the same thing where he'll start doing the whole Spanish thing and she's just like, hey, whatever, I don't have time for you. I mean, they have that same conversation. So if one analogy doesn't work, then the other one usually works.
I'm watching Allie's face as you're talking. Allie's just like, I'm so curious as to how you know about Fuller House.
It's so cringy for her, I know.
I don't even watch Fuller House.
I've never seen one episode, but now I feel like I need to.
I have an 11-year-old. I have to watch what she watches so I know if it's appropriate, or it's
just
always on. But
Allie, I think that you're really good at relating with teenagers when you move into their world and they're able to share with you the games or the websites that they are invested in and stuff. You're able to utilize that and parrot it back to them, and which helps them understand what's going on for them.
Oh, for sure. I'm always curious about the worlds that they live in because I know that it's very different than the one I grew up in.
Yeah.
Even if I was in my, early 20s, their experience right now is different than the one I would have had.
I like how you use memes in your therapy.
Mm-hmm.
I do like memes. I do. The This Is Fine dog. Do you know what I'm talking about with the This Is Fine dog?
Oh, the fire dog.
The fire dog. It's this little dog, and I think he's wearing like a little bowler hat, and he's sitting at a table drinking coffee, and the room around him is on fire. And the little subtext underneath them goes, "This is fine."
Like, I'm good.
Yeah.
It's not fine.
But you use them with adolescents in terms of finding out what they're thinking and what they like and kind of getting into their head. And I know you ask them to bring in different kinds or ones that resonate with them.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's like different types of humor, like light humor, dark humor. It's like, well, show me your spectrum, or like make me a playlist or something. And I'll go and on my own time listen to their playlists and, pick out lines and songs and ask them more about it. Because I think, there are lots of different ways, and children too, like when I worked more with little ones, play is all representational. Art is all representational. So you have to be really curious and know that the way that you're viewing something is not the only way to view something. So.
Yeah. And we incorporate a lot of art into all of our works, whether it's individual, couple, or group, and it is metaphorical.
Right.
Even when we're asking people to draw what, recovery looks like for them, regardless of what recovery would be for them, and or what the problematic behavior is, or what does intrusion, what does the hurt look like?
Right. I use a metaphor often for people who, because I do a lot of work with toxic and abusive relationships. And when women are trying to leave, and I'm being gendered specific right now, but when women are trying to leave, sometimes their partner, they escalate their behavior and they start going like really low blows and they start doing things in desperation. And so the way that I picture that is like somebody drowning. Right? So somebody who's drowning and losing their view of the surface and losing something that they desperately want will hold on to anything to hold on. They'll pull other people down with them if they have to, but they just want air, and they don't there's this desperation that in this situation, from what I gather from these men, is I don't want to lose this person. So I have to do everything I can do to hold on, even if that means pulling them down with me. I have to hold on. I can't let this person get away from me. And so I use that analogy a lot too, because we can all resonate with what it would be like to not be able to breathe.
Right.
And along those same lines, I use another reference too that has to do with scuba diving, that, and I've never been certified in scuba diving, but I really want to. But one of the things they teach you is if you get disoriented underwater and you can't tell which way is up or down, do you know what you're supposed to do?
You hold your breath, right?
You're supposed to exhale.
Float.
Just to follow the bubbles, because the bubbles are always going to go up. So it's really counterintuitive when I'm disoriented. I have maybe what feels like it's my last breath in my body, and I have to let it go to figure out what my next appropriate move is.
Oh, that's beautiful.
That is beautiful.
I was thinking if you held your breath, you'd float up to the top.
I mean,
I think that happens after you pass.
body's a buoyant anyway, Kim. You're going to go up eventually.
That's true.
We don't know water facts. We're therapists, not floaters.
Exactly.
Oh,
I think the one area that, I mean, when it comes to working with couples, and I know that you guys don't, but Kimberly and I do, is that the metaphor would be like a marital garden. At what point do we stop watering it and tending to it, and what kind of weeds and intrusive critters have made their way into our garden? We have to really look at getting in there and getting dirty and getting our hands dirty to clean it out.
Oh, I got one.
What?
I got one. When you're talking about recovery, is talking about how recovery is like putting a rut in your yard, right? So if you've driven through your yard 1,000 times in the same space and you have this big deep rut in your yard, recovery is what? Uploading in the front and putting all kinds of heavy duty things in place and going to a meeting every day and doing all of that, which is similar to putting rocks and loading up that rut so that you want to recover it, right? Or fill it up. And you're heavy in the front, and then you tap it down and you put seed on it and you put water on it and you watch it grow. And then you get to the point where you're, I guess, in recovery and you're watching it grow and you're tending to your recovery. What happens if you forget or you stop tending to that rut in your yard is everything settles and that rut starts to appear again, because it's never the same in that same spot again. And it's the same with recovery. If you never tend to your recovery, your addiction will start to appear again and start to slowly surface. And then you've got to go back and work and recover and fix it, and you can do that. But it's similar to tending to that rut in your yard.
Yeah.
Or Kevin McCulley's video where he's talking about the same kind of concept of how the brain works with those. He's walking around the Grand Canyon, his whole adventure, and was it Memo to Self, his movie?
Yeah, Pleasure Unwoven and Memo to Self, but it's the canyons of Utah.
Oh, yeah, Utah. Like, it's all metaphorical to how the brain works.
Mm-hmm. And the one that we use a lot, right? Whether we're working with individuals, couples, or but just doing our work is, here, circling back as life circles, but to hard-boiled eggs, walking on eggshells. Like, we do not thrive in an eggshell environment. So what does that mean? We're afraid the next time that something's going to crack and it's going to be uncomfortable. And so that's one that we use without even thinking about it anymore.
Even somatically, we use a lot of them. Like, I feel like I've been punched in the gut, stabbed in the back,
Right.
Those kind of things. It's not literal. It's something else.
And I use that to help people who say they don't know how their body feels and they're disconnected with their body. Yeah. And I just, instead of saying, what is that feeling? I'll just say, how does it feel? Well, like I've been kicked in the gut. Well, there's a feeling that goes with that. There's a reason why we use these things, a frog in my throat. There's reasons why these things came about, because that is how it feels. My heart does feel like it's breaking when I have, the loss of a loved one.
Right.
So those things come from a real place.
Mm-hmm.
Final thoughts, metaphors, similes, analogies.
Flyleaf videos are like a box of chocolate. You never know what you're going to get. I channeled my Deep South for a minute and my Forrest Gump. Lucky Forrest Gump.
I have to apologize for bringing Fuller House into this and making you cringe.
I got nothing. How can you top Forrest Gump? I mean, what's there left to say?
Nothing.
That's just perfect.
Yay.
Are you going to bring it on home?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, you.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for joining us for another Flyleaf Talks About Stuff. If you want to know more about our practice, you can visit us online at www.flyleafcounseling.com. You can find us on Facebook by searching for Flyleaf Counseling. We're also on YouTube by searching for Flyleaf Counseling, or you can find us on, what is it called, Kim?
The Insta.
The Instagram. By looking for
Not Instagram, the Insta.
The Insta. You gonna dab after?
Oh no, that would be the end of it.
We don't do that anymore, but
That's the line. There's lots of lines. That's the line.
we don't cross that. But on Instagram, we're Flyleaf _counseling.
Awesome. See you guys next
Thanks,
week.
guys.